Welcome to Talking Grit, a Detroit Lions podcast. Powered by the Monroe County Reporters. Here are your hosts, Jason Harwood and Jacob Litton.
Hey everybody, welcome to Talking Grit. I'm Jason Harwood, and with me is Jacob Litton. Today, let's discuss Myles Garrett. It's a very nuanced conversation, steeped in win now versus sustained winning. Also, there are some serious salary cap implications for the Browns and the Lions. So we're going to talk all about that. First, we're going to start with the salary cap primer. Jacob and I, when we were discussing this, you really got to kind of understand the salary cap to get what the difficulty in signing Myles Garrett. So first of all, before we get there, Jacob, how you doing?
I'm good, man.
Yeah,
How are you?
I'm a little
going
nervous.
live for the first time.
Yeah, I'm a little bit nervous. So we're going to release this as an audio podcast, but we are trying this YouTube live thing going on right now. So we'll see how it goes. Soft opening is what I say. Not a grand opening, soft opening. We're just testing this thing out. So first, let's just learn a little bit about the salary cap. If you're watching YouTube live, you could see, or on Twitch or on Twitter, I'm going to flash some stuff on the screen here. If you're just listening to us, audio, that's fine. We'll fly through this and hopefully it comes over pretty good. So let us share my screen here. All right. Jacob, they announced today how much the salary cap's going to be. So why don't you kind of go over what last year's cap was and what this year's cap is and when teams got to hit that number?
Yeah, so the cap last year, $255.4 million. They announced today the cap this year is going to be $279.2 million, which is actually one of the largest increase year to year. I think it's like the second or third highest that they've ever had. So huge cap increase. Good news for pretty much every team. Anyway, the cap, all teams have to be under the cap by March 12th. So that's right. That's the date that you're looking to be under the cap. Quite a few teams are already under the cap and don't have to worry about it. Quite a few teams are already over the cap and have got to make some decisions quickly, and that includes the Browns.
Exactly. So March 12th is the start of the league year. That's when we could sign free agents. So at that point, if a team is not under the cap, there's like serious ramifications, losing draft picks, fines, all that type of stuff. So it's a serious thing. It is a very hard cap. You can't just flaunt that. You need to respect that. So to understand what we're going to talk about with the Browns and everything, you really need to understand some salary cap terms. So first one is guaranteed money. It's essentially just like it sounds. It's money that's guaranteed to the player. If you cut a player, they're still going to get paid that. So, you see like a Justin Jefferson signing a huge contract, whatever it is, $180 million or whatever, you'll look at the number and like $100 million is guaranteed. Well, Justin Jefferson's going to get paid with that no matter what happens. They cut him or no matter what. The full contract is only if he lives out, he'll only get the full contract if he lives out the whole contract. If you cut a player and he has guaranteed money, that turns into dead money for the team. The team's still responsible. That's still going to count against the cap. The other term that you've heard of is the signing bonus. That is essentially the money that gets paid up front to the player. So they get it right now as opposed to having to get game checks and playing throughout the season. So let's look at some examples here. So a player gets a $30 million signing bonus. He signed for a 3-year contract. That counts for $10 million each year over the life of the contract. So if you sign $100 million for 5, you're going to pay $20 million per year. That's what's going to count for the cap. So that's a way of spreading out money so it doesn't all hit at the cap at the same time. What teams also like to do is they like to do void years, and those are just like basically empty years that the player's never going to play. They put it at the end of the contract so they can spread the cap out even further, the cap hit out even further. So that same contract that we talked about earlier, 3-year, $30 million for 3 years, say they add 2 more void years to the contract. Now, each year is going to account for $6 million towards the cap. So you're saving, $4 million for the cap, but there's a downside to that. That money, that you put in the void year will, that's going to all come due when the contract ends, when it voids. So, you're going to pay the piper down the year, but you're going to save some money up front right now. All right. Jacob, why don't you tell everybody, we've heard this June 1st cut date, and what matters if you cut a player pre-June 1st and what happens if you cut them post-June 1st.
Yeah, so pre-June 1st, all of the players' money counts against the cap this year. So that's why you hear, the post-June 1st designation, and that's so that you can spread out that dead money to this year and next year. So instead of everything counting this year, that would be before June 1st, post-June 1st, it's spread out over 2 seasons.
Transaction can't happen until June 1st. So when we talked about, being under the cap hit on March 12th, you can't have a post-June designation and still be under the cap in March if you're doing that to get under there. Sorry to interrupt there, Jacob.
No, you're good. Good point. But also just where that puts us in talks for the trade and stuff like that too is that, if you're doing the post-June 1st designation, that's obviously after the draft this year. So this year's draft picks would not be, able to be included in a trade like that. So in the Myles Garrett situation, for a team to trade for him right now, the Browns would not be getting any draft picks to use for this year.
If they do the post-June 1st designation. And we'll explain why that's the only
scenario.
Possibility.
Yeah,
right. Exactly. So, just an example with the Lions, when you think about pre-June 1st, post-June 1st, when we talk about the trade, and you talk about a trade, that's Matthew Stafford, Jared Goff. That was a pre-June 1st trade that happened. And so that's why those draft picks were able to be used that year, that first year that we traded them. Otherwise, if it was post-June 1st, Matthew Stafford would have been on our team officially until like June 1st or whenever they hit the trade, and then he would have been traded at that point. We could have spread some of the cap hit out over a few seasons, and the same for Jared Goff with the Rams. You might also hear about contract restructuring, and might seem like a magical term that teams do to free up cap space. And essentially, it does help them free up cap space in the year that they do it. So what they essentially do is, say a player is going to be making $11 million this season. They essentially convert, maybe they have to pay the league minimum to the player. So let's just say in this case, just for money numbers, it's $1 million. They will give the player $10 million. They'll convert their season salary to a bonus, which the player will get up front, and then they will be able to spread that $10 million over 4 years instead of that $11 million hitting all this year. It's going to be $1 million, which is their base salary, and then that cap hit spread over 4 years. So if it's $10 million over 4, that's $2.5 million. So we went from this player costing us $11 million in cap space to $3.5 million. And you may say, well, this is why the cap isn't real, because all of a sudden the player's getting the same amount of money, but it's only costing us $3.5 million for the cap. What you have to realize is that we basically pushed that cap hit forward. So now it's $2.5 million for the next 3 seasons. So it's getting counted. It's just being pushed ahead. There's advantages to doing that because as Jacob already said at the front of this, they've increased the cap every year. So you're hoping that the cap increases at a greater rate than, you're spreading out these cap hits.
That's what we did in the case of Carlton Davis. That was a trade, obviously, last year that we had. Rather than taking on the full contract, we converted some of that into a signing bonus. So that helped the cap last year, and now that's going into our dead cap money right now this year.
Exactly. So, and we can hit on that exactly those numbers. I think I might have put them down when we talked about our Lions cap situation just in a little bit here. So this is exactly what I just went over about, spreading out the cap hit over, 4 years and just moving it forward. So let's move on to like the Myles Garrett contract situation and how it pertains to the Lions and how it pertains to the Browns. We just talked about, the Myles Garrett restructuring the contract, and essentially what they've done, what the Browns have done, is added 5 void years, which is the max that you can add to any contract. The NFL does not allow you to do more than 5 void years. They've converted basically all his salary to bonuses. So they've spread his cap hit out as much as they possibly can. So there's no restructuring the Browns, the Myles Garrett deal to get any more money. They've squeezed that turnip and got, for all that it's worth.
Squeeze the turnip?
Yeah, I know.
Here you go again.
I know.
What does that mean?
Do you even know what a turnip is?
I'm aware of what a turnip is. I just don't understand the
you can't get any more. You can't get. Yeah, I don't know. It's probably I probably used it wrong anyways. So don't worry about it. We'll move on.
The ridiculous stuff comes out of your mouth.
I know. Let's just do that.
Good. Nice. Good use.
Stuff. Yeah, exactly. So essentially, they've done that to save money up front, and it's really costing them now as far as dead cap hit. So as you can see, Jacob kind of already talked about and this chart here will show you if they cut Myles Garrett or they trade him, the dead cap hit on this year alone is $36 million for Myles Garrett. We're going to talk about the Browns cap situation here in a second, and you'll understand why that is just going to be a non-starter for them. If they cut him after or trade him after June 1st, the cap hit is now just down to $14 million this year. So they're going to spread that, that cap hit over 2 years. So that might be a little more palatable to them.
But so, I mean, if they were to trade him right now, which is what everyone's talking about, if they got this trade going, that's what Myles Garrett wants. That's, if they trade him right now, they would be losing $36 million in the dead cap this year. In addition to losing Myles Garrett anyway, losing your best player, you're taking a loss of $36 million.
Yep. Yeah. That's why it doesn't make sense, right? For the Browns' sake. So this has got to be a post-June 1st move just to begin with, which is going to be tough for them. For as Myles, just to wrap up Myles Garrett, his cap number for the next 2 seasons, if you were to acquire him, $19.7 million, $20.3 million, which for Myles Garrett and on a team, very reasonable, right? I mean, that's kind of a steal, to be honest with you. It's just that the Browns have been moving his number forward, so they're just in a lot of trouble. Whereas another team could acquire him, and that's doable for the Lions. So talking about the Browns, they are $24.3 million over in the cap. There's no player the Browns can cut that would save them $5 million in cap space. So to get under this cap number, they are going to have to either cut a lot of players, or the other option is they can extend some players to try to spread out their cap hit. But what's that going to do? It's just going to keep them in cap hell for the foreseeable future. Jacob, what is the one player that's just like causing them so much trouble?
You're talking about
what contract?
On the team or in terms of contracts?
Yeah, on the Browns. Yeah, in terms of contracts.
I think it's both, right? In terms of contracts and hurting the team.
Yeah.
No, it's the Deshaun Watson trade, the Deshaun Watson contract. So this year, Deshaun Watson's cap hit is $72.9 million.
Mm-hmm.
And for the Browns to get under the cap, one of their options would be to spread that cap hit. They'd have to convert, some of that to, the signing bonus. They would have to add they could add 3 void years, and then you're just really, really screwing yourself for the future. But the next largest cap hit for the Browns is Denzel Ward with $24 million. That, I think, is a much more doable, extension that they would be working out is with Denzel Ward. But $72 million for a quarterback who really was not even good enough to be your starter is just what a terrible situation for them to be in.
And if you might say, well, why don't they just cut Deshaun Watson? They can't. They fully guaranteed his contract. If they cut him, you know what his cap hit this year alone? It's $172 million. It's essentially it's like what, 60% of the cap would be on a player that's no longer on your team. And,
yes, even if they were to do a post June 1st, then they could spread that out. It'd be $118 million this year, almost $54 million then next year.
Yeah.
So then your total net savings on the cap this year, you'd still lose $46 million. It just, you can't do it.
No. And so that's, when we talk about why the Lions should make this trade, or, all this goes into it. The Browns have to look at this, and it's got to work for them. They're not going to get rid of their best player, Myles Garrett, and not be compensated sus. So it's just not going to happen, because it's not like trading him is going to save money. It's costing them in the cap. So really quickly here, the Lions cap situation is very good. It's almost $52 million in cap space. We talked about how the Browns can't really do many things to create cap space. The Lions are in the opposite situation. The way they've structured these contracts, the Lions could spread Jared Goff's cap hit later on. Penei Sewell, they could do a lot of things to convert salary into bonus to get cap space right now if they need more. Jacob, you talked about this a little bit earlier, the dead money. So Lions have $18.8 million in dead money. Carlton Davis leads the way. Number 2 is Cameron Sutton with $6.5 million, and Marcus Davenport is $2.3 million. And then looking forward, our cap space next year currently sits at $27.6 million, because that's when some of the big contracts that we've just signed go into effect, like the Penei Sewell, Amon-Ra. Those things are starting to creep up and going to cause us more cap space. So we have plenty of cap space this year. We do have cap space even looking forward, but we also have the Aiden Hutchinson extension coming pretty soon too.
Yeah, that's because we have some wiggle room. We are able to negotiate, and like you just said, we're able to do some of these void years. We can extend some of these in signing bonuses. We still have a lot of wiggle room, but a team like the Browns does not.
Correct. All right, here we go. Now we're going to move on to, let's talk first. What do you think, Jacob, what do you think proper compensation for Garrett is? We got to start there before we could say, I would make this deal or I wouldn't make this deal. So for you, where's the start? Where are we starting with compensation for Garrett? For you, what would you think?
And I'm speaking in terms of what would be fair. If I'm talking, if I'm the Browns, what would be, as a Lions fan, what would I give up? Or if I'm the Browns, what am I looking for?
Yeah, I would say, for both Browns and Lions perspective, because it's got to match up. So, I mean, if you're the Browns, where do you think that they're gonna want or demand for Myles Garrett?
I don't see them. Here's the thing: Myles Garrett's already said he's not going to sign another extension. He's not going to do anything to help them out. He doesn't want to be a Brown. He doesn't want to play for them anymore. He says he's completely done. Brown's general manager says, it's not on the table. We're not looking into it. We're not trading him. I don't know. It's funny because I remember last year when, the trade deadline, they were talking about Myles Garrett. I forget what, it was a former NFL GM that was the Lions should give up. It's two or three first round picks and Jahmyr Gibbs to get Myles Garrett. Something ridiculous like that. Yeah, 3 and Jahmyr. That's ridiculous. But if you're the Browns, that's kind of the package that you have to ask for, right? You're hoping hey, you're taking our best player. He's still in his prime. We're taking a huge loss in money here. We basically are just going to be guaranteed that we're going to be tanking, right? If they do end up trading Myles Garrett, how do any of the other players on the team want to go to work and want to try to go to war and win football games? You pretty much are guaranteeing that you're going to have a top pick in the draft for the next couple years with your contract situation. You're just in the worst possible situation you could be in as a football team. If you are going to trade him, that's what you almost have to ask for. You need 2 to 3 first round picks. You need maybe a player on top of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Browns are going to need players. I know that they're, up against the cap. They're going to need players that they can either adjust cap number and try to get under it this year. But like we talked at the beginning, they're already over in the cap space, and they're going to need to extend and cut players to get there. It's going to be some sort of combination. So they're going to be losing players. I would say that the bare minimum is 2 first rounders, another second or third rounder, and then they're going to have a player or 2 thrown in. That's what I think is where it starts. I think the Browns are in a position that they're going to, they don't want to get rid of Myles Garrett. And, I don't know what kind of power Garrett has other than I'm not going to play. That's what he has, but he's under contract. So, the Browns really, are kind of, they don't need him. They can't restructure him. So it's not like Myles Garrett can hold that over his head. Was like, well, I won't restructure or anything. They can't. They're already maxed out on him.
Right. Yeah, they don't. They have no option. And I'm looking at Denzel Ward's numbers just because I was thinking about that too. They could trade Denzel Ward as a post June 1st trade, save him $14 million. But then the dead cap, you'd be paying him $10 million this year and $19 million next year to not be on the team, and that's one of your other best players. But at the same time, do you have the money? Are you going to be able, if Denzel Ward needs a 4 or 5 year deal, can you afford to pay him? How are you even going to, structure that?
Yeah. And this is your cautionary tale from fully guaranteeing a contract. This all, for me, stems from Deshaun Watson in that deal. And it'd be one thing if he was producing. You could stomach it a little bit better. The problem is that he's been one of the worst starting quarterbacks in the league since he's went to the Browns. His agent has totally fleeced the Browns. Totally fleeced them.
Absolutely. It's still just shocking, looking back on, obviously he was a good player for Houston. He wasn't, I wouldn't say he was worth the contract and the all pro stuff that you are anticipating, plus all the legal stuff that was happening. I just, how good do the Texans feel right now? They got CJ Stroud. They, dodged a bullet.
Well, they get CJ Stroud. They end up getting from those trades. They, end up getting William Anderson Jr. They had young nucleus that they could build off of, and they're not straddled with the off the field stuff that Deshaun Watson was bringing. So, another thing you could argue, okay, the Browns are so dead set on keeping Myles Garrett. They want to keep them in there, and you had said, if you're a player on that team and you get rid of Myles Garrett, you basically are giving up, right? You're essentially, that's what you're saying, right? But if you're the Browns and you're thinking about moving forward, okay, this is a way to move forward because, as long as you're straddled with this Deshaun Watson contract, you're stuck. They're not going to be able to improve their team that great. Myles Garrett's 29 years old, all right? So, okay, let's say they get out of this cap hell in 3 years, 4 years. Let's just say they'll not be totally out, but they'll start to be able to maybe build a team. By that time, you're talking Myles Garrett is 33. Is Myles Garrett at 33 still going to be one of your cornerstone players? At edge, I'm going to say you're going to start to break down.
That's also Myles Garrett's point, is that he's in his prime right now, and he's kind of giving up his body and giving up his best years and his best chance at winning a Super Bowl to this team that just keeps screwing him, really. And, they don't have a chance at winning, anytime soon. So you can't blame him for wanting out.
No, I don't. I don't blame him at all. So let's get to the Lions' perspective on this. We've kind of given you the background information. Jacob and I are both kind of in this. We're in the same ballpark. 2 or 3 first rounders the Lions would have to give up to get him, possibly a player. And then, if they gave up 3 first rounders, they're probably not giving up the second or third rounder that I projected. But, you'd be a 2 first rounders and a second rounder and then a player. So let's just kind of go in that ballpark, Jacob, as far as, this is what compensation we'd have to have. So if you're the Lions, why do you make this trade? Let's just start there. If you're the Lions, let's just talk from it. Let's not say what we want to do. but we'll just say if you're the Lions and you've decided to make this trade, why are you making this trade?
If you're making this trade as the Lions, you're making this trade because it's Myles freaking Garrett, right? I mean, you already have Hutchinson, and this guy's one of the best defensive players in the league. Without the contract situation, if this was just a matter of, hey, do you want to acquire this player or not, then you absolutely 100% want to acquire this guy. Absolutely, you want him in this defense. You want him in the building. You want him across from Hutch. It's exactly what we need, really, right? I mean, if we had, can you imagine Garrett on one side and Hutch on the other? It's almost unfair. That's why you do that, is because then, right, you have an unstoppable defensive line. You've got Aleem in the middle, DJ Reader, just, oh man, nasty thoughts. But that's why you do it, right? If it was not about the money, then you absolutely want him on the team.
Exactly. So, I mean, like you said, they make this line. I mean, how do you defend it? How do you defend that? You can't double both Hutch and Garrett, and then when Aleem gets healthy, Aleem and Reader would be one-on-one in the middle. Sign me up for that all day long, because
that's the best defensive line in NFL history if that's formed.
Yeah, and you're going to be able to do whatever you want, and if you have a good front, and like Brad Holmes had said this year, they believe in building through the trenches, and that would be I go to war with those guys in the trenches all the time. Oh my God, I can't even imagine. If you get a healthy Hutch back with that motor and Myles Garrett, who's just messes with people on the other side. I mean, just messes with. I can't even imagine that. So, yeah, the other, we would obviously this draft pick that we might even keep this draft pick, but we would, because it had to be a post June 1st trade. So, but it's Myles Garrett is going to improve this team more than any draft pick could year one. It's
yes.
Down the line, yes. And that's what we could talk about in the next section here. So, I mean, but as far as improving this team, there's no draft pick that you could possibly pick that would improve us better than Myles Garrett right now, especially where we're picking at 28. It's just not going to happen. I think another reason why the Lions make this, and I don't think you'd normally make this move out of fear, but a benefit of making this trade is another team doesn't get Myles Garrett. You don't have the Bears getting Myles Garrett, because I can't imagine how Lions fans would feel if Ben Johnson over there at the Bears got Myles Garrett. That would be hard to stomach.
True. Very true.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard enough that he's taking our other assistant coaches and he's talking trash about our quarterback and all that.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's kind of burning some bridges, right? And the Bears have had a history of trading for game changer edge rushers, right? Khalil Mack wasn't that long ago, and they traded two first plus for him. So that'd be another.
Their edge defender they have right now was acquired in a trade, was he not?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Montez Sweat, they traded for him, right?
Exactly. Yes, of course. Yep. Right in the middle of the season trade, which actually worked out pretty decently for them.
Yeah.
So any other reasons why the Lions should make this trade? I mean, I think it's obvious. Getting Myles Garrett on your team is the reason why you do it.
Right. The main part of the debate on there, the pro, Myles Garrett fans are because he makes the team better this year and gives us a better chance to win the Super Bowl this year without question.
Exactly. So let's go to the flip side of the coin here. If you're the Lions, why do you not make this trade? I'll let you start there, Jacob. Why would you, if you're Lions, why don't you make this trade?
Here's, I feel like what's the right word for this? The terms of the debate are not up for debate. I think that's pretty clear what the sides are. Like we just talked about because Myles Garrett is Myles Garrett. He gives us the best chance to win the Super Bowl right now. The people that are against are what it's going to cost to get him here, which is our draft picks. I mean, that's the core of this team, has been the players that we've been drafting since Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell have been here. And you would basically be losing out on these rookie players playing, on these smaller contracts, playing at a high level, for low money. I mean, you wouldn't be paying them as much money as you're paying Myles Garrett. And you're going to be having them for longer than you would. So, I mean, there's the other debate there. Right? I mean, what other...
The other thing that Myles Garrett's going to cost a lot more money. We're talking about the draft, talking about re-signing our own players. So we got Hutch coming up for extension. I don't think Myles Garrett would cost that. We're not going to do anything that risks losing Aiden Hutchinson. That's just not going to happen. But, you got Kirby coming up for an extension. The year after that, you're going to have the branch, the Laportas, the Jack Campbell, Jahmyr Gibbs coming up for extensions. I think even if it's going to be very hard to maintain all those players, even if we don't acquire Myles Garrett. If we acquire Myles Garrett, that might cost us one or two of those players just in the amount of cap space that's coming up. So, you have, and that's where people have talked about, do you want an extended window or do you want, put all your eggs in this one basket and this is the year. So I think that's where it kind of comes down to. When you look at Holmes draft picks, right? Almost all of them are, all the early ones are on their way for a second contract. It's too early to tell on Terrion, but, Jack Campbell is definitely on his way for a second contract. Brian Branch, second contract. Laporta, you'd want him for a second contract. Jahmyr Gibbs, I'm going to say you're going to want him for a second contract. And then you go back further. So, these guys, you could count on Holmes to get quality players. So you're going to give up on those. And not only that, if we get Myles Garrett here, we're not going to have enough money to extend second contracts to some of our, existing draft picks.
Yeah, of the 29 players that Brad Holmes and Dan Kimball have drafted, only 4 of them are not currently on the team. And of the 29, 6 of them played in less than 10 games. And that includes the players this year. And Hendon Hooker, who has not had the opportunity. So, our draft picks are making the team, and they're making impacts.
Yep. Now, I will say that, as we build depth with this team, there's going to be less opportunity for us to have starters right away. We saw early on that a lot of these players, Malcolm Rodriguez comes to mind, late draft pick, he's starting, mostly because we didn't have the depth. Now, he outplayed everybody, but at that time, linebacker depth was pretty poor, so I think he had an easier time. We drafted Malcolm Rodriguez, now a player, he's going to have a tougher time outplaying a Jack Campbell, and Alex Anzalone. It's probably not going to be as open. So there's just not as much opportunity. So you could say, well, Holmes' draft class last year didn't, impact very much. Well, there's been less opportunity. And also, let's think about it. We're picking later because we're getting better. We're getting, there's less chance of impactful players because we're drafting later in each of these rounds.
True. Our round 6 picks, Mekhi Wingo and Christian Mahogany, though, both could be impact players this year coming up, though, and it could look very different.
I agree. Mahogany's going to have a chance of starting. Wingo would have played a lot more had he not got injured, just because of all the other injuries around him. He would have had a lot more opportunity. You're hoping some of these development players that, Broderick Martin, Vaki, you're hoping to get more opportunities in this. If we don't bring back Craig Reynolds, Vaki's probably going to be running back number 3, this upcoming year, if they think that he's ready for that. Vaki is new to this position. So getting back to Myles Garrett, Jacob, what side of the coin are you on? Are you on the get Myles Garrett, or that's just, I'd rather keep it the way it is?
I think I would rather keep it the way that it is. It's tough because I do want Myles Garrett. We just talked about picturing him being on the team is amazing. But I just know, taking in all these factors in consideration and trying to look at it from the Browns' perspective, it just doesn't. That would really be like if we're looking at it like, okay, you know what, we're going to give away Aiden Hutchinson. We're going to take a $30 million loss, and we're going to give somebody Aiden Hutchinson away for, a first and second round pick or something that would be reasonable for us in this situation. Just doesn't make sense if you're on the other side of it. I think a lot of Lions fans aren't thinking about that either. Not too many of them are okay with just throwing away 3 first round picks, but I think they're just blinded because they want Myles Garrett here. And I think about the long-term implications and all these, all the salary cap stuff.
Exactly. I think it's a matter of, like, well, if Myles Garrett's available, then we should automatically get him. I just think the Browns are going to, be able to try to get as much as they can get for him because they really have no incentive to move on from Myles Garrett other than, if Myles Garrett refuses to play, then Myles Garrett won't get paid. And, the Browns are still going to be a crappy team. So I think they're going to be a crappy team either way. It's just, it's going to be hard to sell tickets to your fan if you trade away Myles Garrett.
Right.
Now, if you could tell them I got 3 first-round picks and they see a little light at the end of the tunnel, they might stomach that a little bit better. But in the here and now, that's going to be tough for them to stomach. I'm on the conservative end with you, Jacob. I like how this team is built. I want to keep building this team the way and not put all my eggs in one basket. To win the Super Bowl, you have to have a talented roster. You have to have good coaching. You have to have all those things. But there's a fair amount of luck, and we saw it last year with injuries. There's a fair amount of luck that goes in with winning a Super Bowl. And I don't care, who's to say we get Myles Garrett and then Hutch goes down with an injury again, or Myles goes down with an injury, and then, you've put all your hope into this 1 year, and then it's up in smoke. I'd rather have 7 years from now and have a chance at the Super Bowl for 7 years rather than, let's say, train for Myles Garrett and have a chance for a Super Bowl for the 2 years, and then we're gonna be in the situation the Browns are, and we're gonna have to restructure all these contracts to Penei Sewell's, Aiden Hutchinson, Goff. We're gonna have to restructure, and then all of a sudden you're not building your team. You're putting Band-Aids all over the place.
Right. It's not a good spot to be in.
No, not at all. So I'm with you though. If we got Myles Garrett, we're rocking the jersey, right? Are you gonna get the black jersey, or are you gonna get the Honolulu blue, or you can get one of each? That's the question you're gonna ask. I'll be happy about it in the situation. I'll be super excited to watch them on Sunday, Monday, Thursday, whatever day they're playing. I'm gonna be super excited to watch them. However, I won't get full enjoyment when that trade happens because I know that. Nice. I know that I want many chances to win a Super Bowl rather than 1 or 2.
And I didn't see. What do you see in the chat?
There's a live chat stream. There we go. We want a window that is open wide and for a long time. Yeah. That's
nice.
Sent by my wife. So yeah, right. All right. But yeah, so that's
I think that you would still make the call, right? Or yes. Like right now they're at the combine, they're seeing each other. There's no way that a couple people haven't been like, hey, have you taken any calls about Myles? Have you thought about it? What are you looking for? What are people offering you?
Yeah.
I know the Browns GM's like, absolutely not. We're not having the talks. We anticipate him being a Brown or whatever. But at the same time, if somebody walks up to you and is like, if we're offering 3 or 4 first-round picks, do they even consider that for this year? Do they just take the dead money because they know that's what it's leading to? It's interesting when you have the player perspective of him saying, like, I'm not playing for you guys. I'm done. I'm not signing a contract. I'm not, I don't want to be there anymore. He made that post like to the fans and everything that basically like his time there was over with. It's kind of like the Jimmy Butler situation for those that follow the NBA, where it's like he just was like, I don't want to be here. Trade me. They said, we're not going to trade you. We want you to be a member of the Heat. I think the owner even was like, no, he's going to be on the Heat. This is what we're doing. And he said, I'm not playing for you. He starts showing up late for team meetings. He's causing problems at practices. He's causing conflict with the coaches. And he basically made it to where they're like, okay, now we have to trade you. We don't want you around here anymore. You don't want to be here anymore. And then they end up just having to make a trade. Because, really, the ball is in the player's court when it comes, to that, because either, you just keep him there and then you're paying him to not play, or I guess you have all the fines and everything that you can do for him. But there's all kinds of legal loopholes with that, too. But if the player flat out just says, I'm not playing, I'm not suiting up for you anymore, what do you do as that franchise?
Well, and then also you're talking about at that point, if other teams see how destructive a player is doing, like not showing up for meetings and not doing all this stuff, then the price probably goes down a little bit, right? because you're just like, well, they got to get rid of him. I'll just wait this out until it hits a fan. Now, the only thing that fights against that is there's not going to be just one team going for Myles Garrett. There's going to be a lot of teams, go. So I don't know how much, Myles Garrett can really do to influence that, because I think, when you talk about an edge rusher, Holmes just, Holmes said it earlier this week. They don't grow on trees. Everybody wants an edge rusher. No one's going to give them away for free. And I think you said it right. When we're looking at this as like, yeah, we want Myles Garrett. Let's do whatever we get it. If we had teams fighting for Aiden Hutchinson, we're telling them no, right? I mean, as Lions fans, we're saying no way we're ever giving up Aiden Hutchinson. And, but the line, you got to look at it. The Browns are losing. Their future is not as good. Maybe we'd be thinking differently. It's similar about Stafford, right? I mean, we had, our team was not looking good at that point, going through to a new head coach that's talking about biting kneecaps. I mean, things were looking totally different at that time. And, we traded our best player at that time was Stafford, and obviously it ended up working out for us. So you could make a case for the Browns that maybe it'll work out for them, but there's going to be some dark years in between that before it works out.
Been a lot of dark years for Browns fans, so I don't know how much more they can all take.
Yeah, I mean, I got some good friends that are Browns fans, and, we lived with them, right? I mean, we lived in those dark years for the longest time. And, their bright spot was that Pittsburgh playoff game, right? Where they just blew out Pittsburgh, and then you thought they were just going to keep building on that. And somehow they've kept Stefanski, and they have not, they got to the playoffs last year, or 2 years ago, but then lost to Houston. It's just, I don't know. It's hard. It'd be hard to be fans of that franchise.
We say that, but it's ride or die for the Lions too. So
100%. I'm right with you.
Doesn't mean you have to like the ownership and the the GM and the coaching staff and everything that you have, because we've definitely been in that hole.
Man, trying to find the bright spot in anything, hiring Matt Patricia. All right, we're going to go with the Patriots way. And man, that turned into one of the darkest times in Lions fans. I mean, we could have
at least once every 3 weeks, I think you find a reason to mention his name.
Who, me?
Yeah, just Matt Patricia.
God.
Which is always when we're talking about the bad times, but you still bring it up again. It's like, God.
Yeah. It deeply affected me, man. I'm telling you, it was not and a lot of Lions fans, I'd argue that it was worse than the Millen times. I know we went 0-16 in the Millen times, but just the relationship with the city during that time with Matt Patricia and the relationship with the media, it was
not
bad.
Vibing with Detroit at all.
No. And then it's what's made this time with Dan Campbell even sweeter, just because it's like we went 180. We went totally the different way, and it's, obviously it's working out.
Grass was greener on the other side.
It was, and it really was this time. But yeah, I don't see the Myles Garrett trade happening. I mean, I think Holmes kind of poo-pooed it this week, but I wouldn't expect him to say anything else. What? You making fun of me for using that term?
Holmes poo-pooed it. Come on.
Yeah. What do you want me to say?
I don't know.
What would you say instead? What
would that rumor?
Okay. All right. I don't. If anyone,
that's just the first thing that came to my mind.
Okay.
He poo-pooed it.
I know. It's still the dad in me talking, using clean words.
Okay.
All right, man. Is there anything else you want to throw in this conversation, or are we going to wrap this up?
No. I mean, it'll be funny to look back on this if we do trade for Myles Garrett, or if he even gets traded in general, no matter what, if he gets traded to a different team. Be interesting to look back and see how far off we were with, what they're getting.
Yep. I can't see this going for anything that less than 2. Unless they could throw in some really top-notch players in there, which, I guess could happen. But anyways, I don't think this is going to happen, but let's, we're on record now. We're on record. And then when we're cheering, week 2, when Myles Garrett has 3 sacks and Aiden has 3, people will be throwing in our face and saying, see, you didn't even want to trade for him. But, we'll see.
Jason poo-pooed it.
I did poo-pooed this trade. Poo-poo. I like that. I mean, maybe I'll make that a drop. Anyways, all right. For Jacob, I'm Jason. Let's go Lions. Boom.